Thanks for joining.
You're welcome.
We came to connect through my sister-in-law, who seems to be doing a lot of work in regards to reaching out to people in her community that have basically been ignored.
Right.
Which seems to be the mantra these days, which is about time. Yeah, exactly. So talk to me a little bit about, your community and how you sort of came into what you're doing and all these people you're connecting.
Yeah, so I actually launched Black Girl Group in 2016 after being laid off of my full-time job in public relations. During the time leading, and I'm sorry, it's thundering here, by the way.
Wow. Yeah, you're in the heat.
Right, right. But yeah, so whenever I launched Black Girl Group, I was working a really stressful job in heating and air conditioning PR, which was not sexy at all. I was super stressed out at the time. I had a 2-year-old and my hair was starting to fall out. I was putting in over 14-hour days. And I was just like, you know what, there has to be more to life. And so I remember one night going to sleep after a really stressful day saying like, okay, God, like you're going to have to show me, is there something else for me to do? Because this just doesn't feel like it. And like that night, I literally dreamed of the words Black Girl Group. But I'm also the same person where like, if life shows me a sign, I need another sign to prove that that was actually a sign. So I need like the lights to blink twice, something for me to actually take it seriously. And so I'm like, okay, I had a dream about the words Black Girl Group. So what does that mean for me? And so literally the next night I had a dream that I was going to be laid off from my job. Like I saw where I was sitting at, I saw the room. And about 2 or 3 weeks after that, I lost my job. And then I'm like, you know what? Okay, so I'm supposed to start this thing called Black Girl Group. And then a couple weeks later, I had another dream where I saw that Black Girl Group would be a full service staffing agency that connected African-American women, freelancers to companies seeking to outsource talent. And so literally, whenever I tell people that I am literally following my dream right now, like I wholeheartedly mean like I am following my dream. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know that I saw it in a dream. And as we have seen in the climate that we're in now, we're now starting to see exactly why I had that dream, because we're starting to see a lot of those things manifest now in our realities.
Yeah, I mean, you're not the only mother who has a full-time working job, working 14 hours a day with a young kid. And, certainly during COVID-19, I mean, all these mothers now at home working with children, and, it's stressful. And you're right, there is more to life, right? There's a way to balance. I mean, I'll tell you, back in the early 90s, really when the internet was, just starting to become a reality, I thought at that point of time that mothers would be able, right, to work at home at least 2 or 3 days a week and go to the office and have all that flexibility. But, all the people that started those big tech companies were men. So that didn't happen, but it's happening now. And so it's a good thing to see.
It is. And I'm so happy. I mean, because I think, like you said, for years, we've known that you actually get more work done, in my opinion, working from home. You probably end up doing more work when you're working from home versus actually being in the office. Because when you're in the office, you get up for bathroom breaks, you get up to go chat with your friends or with your other coworkers, and then you end up wasting a lot of time. But when you're at home, I mean, you may have the distraction of, a kid or, food in the refrigerator or something on TV, but you definitely don't get up as much. And then you really don't even know when to turn it off sometimes too. So I definitely think I think a lot of companies are starting to see that there's more of an advantage to having people work at home versus being in the office.
So talk about how you started to, create this company. I mean, here you are, no job, sign from above that you need to start something. And, what did you do?
Okay, so first of all, as I was starting the company, I was still looking for a job because I desperately needed a job. Like I had to pay my bills. Like these bills were not going to pay themselves. But what ended up happening was I could not find a job. And I was so disappointed because I'm just like, I have all this experience. I went to college. I have a public relations degree. Actually, my degree is in journalism and mass communications. And so I'm thinking like, there should be opportunities, knocking down my door. And that just wasn't the case. And so all while I'm starting this business, I started freelancing myself. And so I started reaching out to clients saying, hey, do you need PR help? Or hey, do you need help with ghostwriting? Or do you need
help? Where are you located?
I'm in North Carolina.
You're in North Carolina. So
Yeah.
what kind of companies were you reaching out to?
Oh no, so I was reaching out to companies from across the country because oftentimes for me, I would say I have maybe one client who's actually based out of North Carolina to this day. So I just started reaching out all over saying like, hey, you know, do you need some help? So that's tech companies, entertainment, anything that I had done in my previous lives and full-time work. I was reaching out to those industries because I had the experience. I just needed someone to give me a chance. And so I started doing some freelance work here and there. And then I started to realize like, hey, Black Girl Group is also solving my problem too, because I can't find work. And so now I'm able to not only find work, but now I'm connecting with these companies. So then I can say, hey, if you need other work done, I have this freelance marketplace now to also connect you with other freelancers. And so what I started doing was I started using money from my own freelance gigs to help fund into my business. And then little by little, I started to grow my network through Black Girl Group.
Were you making more money freelancing than the actual full-time job you had prior to?
Yeah, after a while I was. And it's so crazy because I'm just like, wow. So it took for me to lose my job to actually get the salary increase that I wanted, which was really bizarre to me. And even whenever, and the funny thing is when I told people that I was freelancing, because you use the word free, they're like, so you're working for free? And I'm like, no, like I'm just not set on one particular job. And so lots of people think whenever you talk about freelancers that you're penny pinchers. And I'm like, well, no, like there are some freelancers out there who are struggling, but not every single freelancer out there is struggling to find work. And it did take some time, you know, to gain some momentum within my freelance work. But after a while, I was able to get more and more work just simply based off of referrals.
How did you start to grow the marketplace? I mean, it is filled with Black women at this point.
Yeah, so we have over 5,000 women in our database, and it has been crazy. So I started out, and we were only on just Twitter at the time. And so what I started to do, and because I also have a background in search engine optimization, I started doing research.
Which is key.
Right. So I actually felt like I had the major tool that it took to actually create content that people were looking for. So I started doing like keyword research to see what words had the highest traffic and what words were people searching for when they were looking for my more diverse freelancers. But then on the flip side, what questions were freelancers also asking? And so literally I started creating content answering those questions that people were searching. And so then traffic came by default just because people were searching, how do I charge as a freelancer? You know, how many words should I write for one article? Or, you know, how much should I pay a graphic designer? All these different questions people were asking Google, I now became the answer to those questions on my website. And so organically traffic started to come in that way. In addition, because I am, like I said, like I was a freelancer as well, I started posting on my own personal social media pages about Black Girl Group. And so folks started inquiring like, hey, what's Black Girl Group? How can you help other freelancers? And people saw that I was able to get clients. So then they were coming to me saying, well, how can I get clients? And then, you know, on the flip side, my clients were coming to me saying, hey, we want to find more Black people like you, but we don't know where to find them. And I'm just like, well, great. They're right here. I have a whole database full of them now. And so really, it just kind of grew fast. It's
well,
great.
It does seem to be the thing, right? You know, it's like you talk to companies who certainly are interested in diversifying and, you know, and hiring Black people. And, you know, I've heard this time and time again, well, we're having a hard time finding them. And it's just like, well, then look harder. Right. It's not like they're not out there. It's just a matter of, you know, they might not be standing in front of your door.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. It is a matter of looking harder. And then sometimes I don't think people realize that really you don't even have to look that hard. Like there are so many talented Black women and Black men who are out there. And, you know, even we've talked previously about how, you know, more companies should try reaching out to historically Black colleges and universities, or reaching out to, you know, local organizations in your area, in your community, who have African-American professionals out there to be able to make sure that you're continuing to diversify your employee database.
Right, because certainly diverse companies do better in the long run. I mean, that data is strict, is out there, no questions asked. So what kind of people are basically in your database in regards to the biggest talent pool?
Yeah, so the biggest talent pool is copywriters.
Okay.
We also have graphic designers, we have web designers, advertising, PR, and marketing. So really, we cater very heavily on the creative aspect of a business. So anything that you need to outsource in terms of creatives, we're definitely the go-to person for you.
That's amazing. And where are the most of your where are most of the women that have joined, your forces? I mean, I'm going to assume that you started out talking to friends who were in the same predicament that you were, that were like, yeah, we'll join. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're exactly right. That is what happened. And at that point they were like me, so they didn't have anything to lose. And so it's been interesting. So a lot of our freelancers are actually not in North Carolina. I think we have maybe one or two freelancers from North Carolina. And so most times people don't even know that I live in North Carolina. We have freelancers in New York. We have them in Atlanta, Georgia, Los Angeles, and Houston, Texas, which is very strange because I've never even been to Houston before. But those areas, we have a very high concentration of freelancers. And I also think it's because of the areas too, they're more freelance friendly. But it's definitely been interesting to see where some of the random freelancers have been located.
Right. I don't know so much as they're freelance friendly, or that the people that are drawn to urban areas tend to be a little more on the hustle.
Oh, true. Yeah.
And a little more of an entrepreneurial spirit, that they'll just figure out how to make it work. It would be amazing. You do have 5,000 women in there. If you could figure out if there are women in small towns across this country that find themselves, I mean, they're certainly not going to work for Coca-Cola in a tiny little town somewhere in Kentucky, although they might have the skill set to certainly be a freelancer for one of the corporations that you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also from a really small town in North Carolina. I live in a much bigger area now, but I often think about that. Like, hey, like some of my friends from back home who are freelancers, I often try to convince them, like, hey, I have this client. Would you be interested? And they're just like, oh, well, they may want me to move out there. I'm like, no, I've done this. They're not going to want you to move. You can stay exactly where you are and still have the opportunity to work with big clients. But I think even sometimes in those smaller areas, it's about opening up your mind to opportunities that may not be familiar to you, but could have a better outcome for you in the long run.
I totally agree. And so who are some of the clients that you work with?
So we work with both large and small companies. Some of the biggest companies we've worked for have been Viacom, the NFL. We actually worked with Mountain Dew last summer, which was really fun. Who else?
And do they come to you sometimes to put together a team?
Yeah, so for Mountain Dew, we actually put together an ambassador team. They were launching a new energy drink, and they were going to be at a music festival, and they needed someone to come out there and be the face of their brand. And so we put together a team of ambassadors for them to be able to push that product, which was interesting because prior to that contract, we had never considered doing brand ambassador work. But then when they came to us, I'm like, okay, I'm sure they could do ambassador work. Like it could make sense. And we pulled it together actually in less than 48 hours. I was kind of amazed myself. It was stressful during the time, but we pulled it together, and it's opened up so many opportunities since then.
Well, everyone in, your network is entrepreneurial ladies, right?
Yeah.
And so, what do you think about everything that's going on right now in this country? I mean, obviously it's been a perfect storm. Everyone's home, even though if you have a job,
Yeah.
and so, you can really react to the moment because no one knows where you are. But, are you getting more inbound? What are you hearing from your community? You got 5,000 women there.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I will be completely honest, like we freaked out. Because we had signed on some major contracts. When I tell you that 2020 was going to be our year, like 2020 was going to be our year, like I was so excited. And literally, like little by little, I started getting emails saying, hey, we're having budget cuts. And around early March, people started bowing out of contracts. I'm like, okay, this is getting really serious. And so I was always having to deliver bad news. Like I never had good news for our freelancers. And then when everything completely shut down, my freelancers were coming to me no longer because, you know, they were looking for work. They're like, well, Stephanie, how can I pay my bills? Or how can I eat? What am I going to do? Like I have a child at home. I don't have anything. And like, if they didn't have anything, we weren't having business. So I didn't have anything to give them either. And so I was like, you know what? Now we're going to have to pivot into figuring out how we can be more of a resource hub. So I started connecting them to places where they could find free groceries, or connecting them to places where they could find, you know, mental health resources for some of them who were literally on the edge because they didn't know how they were going to feed their family. And so really I became a source of information where if anyone needed help with practically anything, I didn't have the answers, but I was willing to connect them to resources, to people who did have those answers for them. Since then, things, would you say?
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, and you know what? In the moment, it was just like, oh my God, these people are coming to me, and I don't know because I can't even help myself. But I also realized, like, you know what, 5,000 women, this is bigger than just me. Like, I've got to figure out how I can help these women survive, because if I don't help them survive now, when things do go back to normal, they're not going to be here anymore for me to be able to provide opportunities for them.
That's
And so my mindset really shifted in that time. Over the last couple of months, you know, since the racial injustices has started to happen, and it's been a big conversation, we've started to receive more and more calls from companies who are looking to diversify their talent pools, especially because if you think about it, it's really the perfect storm right now for my platform because lots of companies have laid off employees, but they still have work that needs to be done. Yep. So what do they need? They need freelancers. On the flip side, you have all this, you know, these racial injustices happening across the country. And so people are looking to diversify. So it's like, okay, Black women and freelancers is kind of a win-win right now. And so a lot of companies are starting to see that, and they're starting to reach out and trying to figure out how they can pull together money to be able to hire some of these freelancers. So I have been able to start provide some good news to some of my freelancers, but we're still not where I would like to be. We'll get there.
Yeah, you will get there. I mean, I'm happy to hear that companies have woke up and have, you know, and have dug through the internet to see, you know, we need people, we're not going to hire them. And I think we're going to see a lot more freelancing in the future, yeah. You know, which is another reason we should be having healthcare for all, because, you know, the reason that we have had large corporations, not only for job security, but also it pays for healthcare. Yeah. You know, and so you're relying on these companies to pay for healthcare. If you're a freelance person, it becomes very expensive to have that.
And you know what, like I've seen that firsthand because, you know, folks have reached out to me where it's like, well, I'm sick. Well, I don't have health insurance. What am I going to do? And it's just like, I really don't know. But I do know that people are really, you know, right now, especially, people are looking past the idea that people don't have insurance. And so they're seeing more patients right now. But I don't know how long that's going to last. Like, I feel like eventually things are going to go back to normal. And it's like, okay, you're on your own again. But that is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, we will see, right? I unclear if we will go back to normal. You know, and also, you know, when you start taking away unemployment and you drop the price of unemployment, well, what happens when those people stop being able to have a roof over their head and food on their plate? Like, that is a very bad thing. And so, you know, we will see what happens.
Let me ask you this then. Okay, so I'm curious because you do raise an interesting point, and I think that it's easy for a lot of the decision makers in this world to say, you know, hey, we need to cut off unemployment. Like, I actually read an article where they said that they're not paying people to stay at home more. And it's like, for goodness sake, you gave people an extra $600 more. Like, come on, like they're just surviving at this point. And so what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that, you know, we are going to get to a place where our country's leadership becomes more compassionate to Americans less fortunate, or no?
God, I hope so. But, you know, I think one of the problems with the GOP running our country is their entire platform is built on less government.
Yeah.
And when you're built on less government, you actually don't know how to manage government. Like, these people are all terrible CEOs, right? They have no compassion and they don't know how to manage, and they're not thinking forward. And so whether you like one party or the other, at least I do believe the Democrats have a lot more compassion, and they do think about consequences. And so when I hear that, they're going to cut costs to unemployment because, enough is enough, it's like, well, then what happens? Do you want people standing in lines for 5 hours to get food? Do you want more families living on the street? I mean, we're one of the wealthiest nations in the country, in the world. Like, this is not acceptable. And so, we will see. But at the end of the day, just like you're having companies reach out to you, I do think that the private sector will be the savior in a lot of things, even though we do need government laws and direction for the public sector to have success.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, it's crazy out there. It's just a crazy time.
It is. And I'm just interested to see what 2021 brings. I really am. I mean, I feel like I was going to say it could get worse or it could get better. I'm going to hope that it gets better, going into a new year.
Yeah, I'm going to hope so too. But, I love what you've done. I mean, it's really extremely entrepreneurial, and you're right. There's no reason why any of these people who are college educated people that certainly understand things from a very different perspective from where they came from, that they shouldn't be, companies shouldn't be thrilled, to reach out and have people involved in these projects. It doesn't mean they have to hire them full time. I mean, not that they couldn't, because it doesn't matter where you are these days. Right. I think the only thing that is a great thing is if you're on the same time zone, but otherwise it doesn't really make any difference.
Right. Yeah. But if you think about it, at this point, no one is really getting much sleep. So does it matter what time zone you're on? I feel like everyone's sleep pattern is just gone at this point.
It's totally true. And are you seeing more and more women reach out to you and start to find you?
I am, yes. And again, like, that's just by default because of my SEO for my website. And then also because I have a PR background, I have been on more television platforms. So people see me on TV. And so then they're like, oh, hey, how can I be a part of Black Girl Group? Can you help me find a job? And of course, like, I can't save the world, but my plan is, within the next several years to be able to create more ongoing opportunities. So folks no longer have to reach out saying, hey, what's available? Like, I'm more so coming to you, begging you to take on more projects. So.
For sure. What TV shows have you been on?
So I've been on CNN. I have been on Fox. I've been featured on the Today Show. And what else?
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I can't think. Yeah, and it's all been random, and it's been great because I've been doing it from the comfort of my home. and you know how things work too, like, especially when it comes to TV, is that oftentimes you have to go fly out to these places on your own dime, but it's worth it for the visibility. But since we're all in the middle of a pandemic, I don't have to go anywhere. So I'm saving money. Like, I literally, I quiet my daughter down and say, hey, I have an interview, and then I do it. So it's been really good. It's more than anything, it's given more people the opportunity to see the work that I'm doing, both on the freelancer side and on the client side as well.
That's amazing. It's so great. And I think what's super cool is that there's probably more people out there doing interesting things like you are, that are trying to help and support their communities and your communities across the country. And that now people are, going out and trying to find, how do we find, more Black women and men? I mean, you're all women, but that are, we can bring into the company to be part of a project and do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there are times whenever, companies will reach out and ask me, well, do you know of other companies who are doing similar work? And I'm the person where I'm always willing to pull up a seat for someone else. So I'm like, oh, yes, I know other companies, and I can give them a list, and whether or not they choose to use them, of course, that's up to them to follow up. But I'm definitely always willing to make sure that I use my opportunity at the table to help more people come to the table as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're using yourself to help women that are part of your group that are in need. I mean, that is really quite amazing and very impressive.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on. It was so great. I mean, Dana just so excited about talking to you and what you've done and what you built. And that's her world, of freelance. And, I think that what's been great is she's taken a big, deep dive into the World Wide Web and found people like yourselves who are doing different things in different parts of the country that, people don't know about, and amplifying it so that, more jobs for more people.
Yeah, and thank you, and people like you and Dana for being allies and for giving us opportunities to be in even more spaces as well. Because I think at the end of the day, we're all in this together, and any way we can help amplify one another, it just makes the world a better place. So thank you too.
100%. Equality is a better place to be.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks, Stephanie. And, I hope to find some companies I can send your way too.
Please do, please do, and thank you again so much.
All right. Take care.